Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Join the nation by hitting that subscribe button, and if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button, and your membership options that lead to citizenship in the Rabyd Nation will be presented to you. Today it's Friday, it's Rabyd Reflections, and I am kind of getting up on my soapbox every Friday and kind of talking about an issue. And this week, the issue kind of was inspired very recently, like I think yesterday or today, and I was in a conversation with somebody about getting on their podcast, and they were bringing up the topic of states that still allow clergy to not report like abuse, particularly sexual abuse of children. And the surprising, alarming statistic for those of you who aren't aware is there's like 22 states of the Union right now, of the 50, that have absolutely no laws that require a clergy person to report sexual abuse. And as fascinating as a topic that is all in and of itself, I began to think a little bit more along the lines of clergy privilege. And the question of, because as a former, I get a question a lot about, as a former pastor, what do I think? I got that today about Jesus being the origin of the church and the church being the origin of the Bible, and what did I think about that as a former pastor? My response to that is, well, Jesus is probably the kernel impetus of the church, but I think the church is largely responsible for its own creation in a lot of respect, and I would argue that Paul probably had a lot more to creating the church than anybody else. And I would say that the Bible, it's a concoction of the church. As they got older and got past that first apocalyptic generation, they had to kind of continue to justify their own existence. And so, they came up with the Bible, particularly the Gospels and other writings that they began to collect in order to do that. But it kind of goes also back to, as a former pastor, what do I think about clergy privilege? Now, clergy privilege is the privilege that we seem to give clergy members in our society. You put a reverend in front of your name, you put a pastor in front of your name, you put the name, priest or father in front of your name, and all of a sudden it accords respect for some simple unknown reason, or maybe it is very well known. I think there's a lot of good political science and cultural anthropological reasons why this happens. I think it really goes back to the old days where you had a tribal chief who was the official leader, and then you had the shaman, who was the unofficial influencer. And this dynamic in human society has remained to this day. It's just gotten more sophisticated. And I think when we look at clergy privilege, like as a former pastor, I used to get it all the time. And it goes beyond other things, because, I would show up at an event, and half the time I never had to pay for my meal. I never had to pay for anything, really. I would show up to a lot of things and people just give it for free. And, I appreciated that because it was flat broke most of the time. But, you end up seeing a lot of privileged things. Like if you say something in a meeting, people just pay attention to it for no other reason than you have that title in front of your name. And I looked at, now that I'm a former pastor and I'm an atheist, I look back at it and I go, what the hell were they doing that for? Okay, what exactly had I done that somebody else in a different context couldn't have done? And it's because human beings still are very inherently religious that they endow some sort of respectability to authority figures that are also religious. And I think it's become painfully obvious that there really isn't any good reason, rational reason to do that. Okay, and that's why you see a lot of what you see particularly in American society with our televangelists. It's amazing how much I watch how they preach about their authority as ministers all the time. And this goes back to the authority principle. I think what you see with religious leadership and why they attach themselves to certain political movements or whatever, or why they move forward, is because they are trying to maintain their own respectability, their own clout, because they have the word pastor or reverend in front of them, their name, okay? And when you really look at it, there's nothing that they do, and I would admit this as a pastor, there's nothing I really did that somebody else couldn't have done in a secular context and had very similar results. Inspirational speaking, teaching about certain subjects. Yeah, a lot of people could do that. Organizing events, singing songs together in a choir. You break all the parts of like what a church does apart, and you get 5 or 6 secular organizations that'll probably be doing it a lot better and more specifically than a clergy person could. But clergy get a lot of privileges, like because of assumptions. Okay, like the whole issue of clergy abuse and being silent about abuse and not having to report it. It all goes back to that privileged conversations, okay, where clergy people are allowed to hear the confessions of people where they've done even very despicable things, and they're supposed to offer, forgiveness and absolution. And because we want to maintain that in society, we don't really deal with it legally. And the problem is then abuse continues in those situations, and the clergy person doesn't say anything about it because he doesn't want to ruin that privileged information hotline, because on a certain level that's also beneficial. I mean, I go to a therapist and I expect privilege, communication, okay? But my therapist is under absolute obligation if I were to report to her that I had sexually abused somebody or had murdered somebody or something, I had committed a crime. She is expected to report that crime because she doesn't have the protection umbrella of privilege. And, of that kind of privilege, okay? She has her client, patient, kind of privilege, but she doesn't have the kind that says, because I have religious belief and I'm a religious figure, there are certain things I don't have to report. Okay, well, that's just one aspect of it. But it's also this whole societal aspect of it, like where clergy members just show up and somehow they have influence on things. I remember when I ran for school board, the fact that I was a pastor got a lot of people to vote for me for no other reason than that I was a spiritual figure that believed in God. That somehow was clout in and of itself. And it's still very puzzling to me now, looking back at it, because there really is no reason to do it. And something is going to have to, of course, drastically change to fix that, but I'm not really sure what it's going to be. But it goes back to this authority principle. And this is where there's a very deadly thing inside of religion with the authority thing. Because when I was a Pentecostal, I used to hear this preaching about don't touch the Lord's anointed. Okay, you can't, preachers would get up in their pulpit and they would say, listen, I'm the man of God, I'm the guy in the pulpit, I'm the guy that's God. God has, through his Holy Spirit, anointed me to be the leader of this. How dare you? Now, they didn't put it this way. They would say, do you really think it's all that smart to come against me when God is the one speaking through me? And it really what it comes off as to me now is, how dare you assault my authority as the leader of this group of people, because God has anointed me to be a leader. You're not just coming up against me, you're coming up against God. And you see this in the New Testament too, because Moses, gets challenged in his leadership a couple times and people end up dead, And, I think the whole Ananias and Sapphira thing with Peter is kind of the same thing. You haven't, done this against us, you've done it against God kind of thing. Is the whole backing behind this authoritative issue and privilege of the clergy. And I think that's become a real problem for me and a lot of other people who are atheists, because we don't really see, if God doesn't exist to give you this authority, then you really don't have any authority. Okay, you're just making it up. And I think it does go back to a cultural issue of, there's the official leaders in a town, and then there's the influencers, the people that influence public opinion. And clergy members are that. They are people that influence public opinion, okay, whether they want to or not, whether they're apolitical or not, because they're preaching about certain philosophies and morals and whatever, and that has an effect on people, and people vote that way or act that way or are activists that direction. And so we still have that problem. But the whole idea of God being the authority and his morality based on authority, and then God's word, the Bible, being authoritative. This is particularly true in the United States, where Christianity is still very strong and very able, though I would argue not as much as it was 30, 40 years ago. But you have this, and then of course we have our representative in the pulpit, and that carries over onto them, that somehow they've picked up, by hanging around God and his word, that they have this authority too. And then when you add some of this preaching of touch not the Lord's anointed, you've created a situation where you have an individual that cannot be questioned, okay? And that's what leads to cultic behavior. That's what leads to abuse and nobody reporting it. It's what leads to, the issues of things in the church. Why do people give money to these people? Well, because they're the authority, and they say, if you tithe your 10% and you give them above and beyond, that's seed faith, and that's going to lead you to being richer. Now, that's the con, but behind that also is, we're also the authority and we say so, and so they give you money. And then you go into sexual issues and sexual identity issues, and the church comes out and says, this is the only proper way to have a sexual relationship, this is the only way, this is the only relationship that's acceptable to God. Or, they can do other things like, Jim Jones was infamous for, talking about the sanctity of marriage, but, at the same time, he was sleeping with pretty much every woman in his cult, including married ones, and getting away with it because he was the Lord's anointed. The Lord's anointed and this whole idea of clergy privilege can allow people, simply because they give a title to themselves. What did I do to earn that when I was a pastor? Okay, I'm not going to beat up on you. What did I do to earn that? Well, I got a religious education, so it makes me knowledgeable about religious topics. I went through the rigmarole of having an organization ordain me after licensing me. But what was their criteria? That I had done anything good? No, I just had to believe certain doctrines and feel I was called of God, and that I was God's anointed, one of God's anointed. That's all I had to really do. And once I got past all that, what did I do after that? Well, I tried to lead a group of people to a certain mission and vision for God. That's it. Okay, take God out of the equation of all that, and all of that is meaningless nonsense. Okay, and I'm going to be blunt. I think it's just meaningless nonsense now. It's hard for me as a former minister. This is where, my therapy comes in, because I look back at it and how I used my privilege sometimes to get away with things, to not get as much scrutiny. I just didn't want to be bothered. Putting my foot down, which was rare, but I would put my foot down, and I said, no, this is the direction we're going. I'm the pastor, and this is where we're going to go. And it kind of bothers me now. I still get over some of the bad advice I gave to people when they were asking biblical advice, and you pull up the Bible and you say, well, this is what the Bible says, and this is what you need to do. And now you look back at it, and it's like, no, that was stupid. And the guilt about that still exists for me, and that's why I still go to therapy. But it's like we accord people this status as a wise person, as a shaman, as somebody who is an influencer. And it causes us to really just give them credence and, give them socially a lot of leeway to do whatever they want, simply because of that. And I think that needs to end at some point. I don't know if it'll ever end because human beings are inherently tribalistic and we love having our chiefs and shamans, but it seems to me that at some point a secular society has to look at clergy and go, sorry, you're not all that important. And I think the funny thing is, I think the founding fathers of the United States did that when they basically said there's no religious litmus test to be in politics. You don't have to be, if you want to be one of those people and use that to your advantage in politics, we're not going to stop you, but we're not going to require you to be some sort of religion or whatever to hold public office, which is still really weird today in the United States because, one of the stumps that every politician has to get on is, I believe in God or I have some sort of religion. And it's still a thing. But when it comes to clergy, they don't get any special passes in the United States. And that's kind of where we said, no, religion, stay out. And that continues to be the battle in the United States, of course, between the Christian nationalists and the people like myself who say, keep on your side of the aisle, we'll keep on our side. But that's kind of where it's at. So why the privilege? Why do clergy get privilege? I'd be interested to hear in the comments what some of you think about this issue, because from my perspective as a former minister, I just don't now look back at it and I don't get why people accord them respect. I get the cultural reasons and I get the political science reasons because of influencers versus, official leaders is always a dynamic in politics. And then you have the cultural reasons of having a chief that is checked and balanced by a spiritual leader, because shamans have real power from a social point of view. I get that part, but there's other aspects to it with the authority thing, and why do people buy into the fact that just because somebody puts a reverend in front of their name, it makes them some sort of special or good person? I just don't get it, considering all the evidence to the contrary. Okay, considering all the evidence to the contrary. Got a few comments, more of the tenor of the discussions this week. Going back, to Monday where I reacted. It was a very long reaction to Inspiring Philosophy. Got a lot of good comments about that, mostly from atheists like myself going, this seems to be the trend in apologetics, where people are just, they're forgetting about the rational reasons and it's just saying, in your heart that God is real. And it's like, it's so disingenuous and dishonest, and it's just the way it is. And I'm happy to continue to call it out, so we'll keep doing that. The biblical discussion on Enoch became very interesting because Enoch actually leaves us the book of Enoch, and it's a very interesting read. I'm going to have to pick it up again. One of the things I'm doing, hopefully very soon, I have a lot of things on my list for the channel, but I'm hoping that this weekend I'll get some of them done. But one of the things is to put together an Amazon wish list. Some of you may want to support the channel in that way, because one of the things that happened when I moved from Texas is I had to leave a lot of my library behind, and I just donated it. Ironically, to Goodwill, I donated a lot of my atheist books. And so, so I need to rebuild my atheist library with some of my classics, and so I'll probably put that on that list. But it's that, looking at Enoch and getting, maybe some of those old ancient writings back into my library, the church fathers, the apocryphal stuff like Enoch, just so I can reference it again. But, it's strange to me that we have this figure that still gets a lot of creds. Didn't see a lot of defense of that one. The idea of can a atheist, come from Bible study? A lot of comments came from atheists saying, I talk to my Christian friends and I know the Bible better than they do. That is so common. It's funny, one of the criticisms I used to get when I first ran this channel is, you don't know the Bible. And I'm like, dude, I I got a bachelor's degree in biblical studies and a master in theological studies, and I was a minister for 20 years. What do you mean I don't know the Bible? I said, I know atheists that know the Bible better than I do. And it's funny how atheists seem to know the Bible better because they studied it, and that's why they're atheists. Okay, and it's almost like, I talked about biblical study this week. It's almost like there's a line that theists don't cross. They read all the passages that are enlightening to them, give them a lot of hope or whatever, and all the rest of it they kind of avoid or they dismiss because they're picking and choosing like it's a like it's a smorgasbord. It's like an open kitchen, and they pick what they want. Okay, and that's the problem with a lot of biblical studies. And when you have an atheist, they usually know the Bible pretty well because they went into the other place, the dark corners that nobody wanted to go to. And so that's probably a slam on Christians a little bit, and any other person with a holy book is often I reach religious people. They don't know the Bible as well as they think they do. We had comments in the comments of some of my premieres where, particularly with Inspiring Philosophy video, where the guy's like, well, people, God doesn't throw anybody in hell. And it's like, have you read your Bible? Okay, there are several places where God is imagined to be sitting on a throne, Go to the place prepared for the devil and his angels. That seems to be a decree by God, sending them to hell, because I never knew you. Okay, Jesus says that in the Sermon on the Mount. That doesn't seem to be people just walking willy-nilly into hell without God pushing them or saying that that's where they have to go. God isn't getting off the clock there. He's not getting off the dock, from my perspective. So my issue sometimes with the biblical study question and with, is biblical study good for an atheist is most of the time I'm preaching to the choir because most of the time atheists know the Bible better than most people. And they're very biblically literate. So they take a very literal stand to the Bible. And so that kind of comment was interesting to me this week. So, the continued running discussion of God, I am continuing to pose questions that cause people to think about the omni-God. I am trying right now to dismiss the omni-God as a possibility. I don't think it is a possibility. I didn't think it was a possibility when I was a theist. And I'm now even more convinced that the omni-God is a human concoction that is logically incoherent because it's a human concoction. When you really get down to the questions of the omni-God, it just doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work. And it's logically inconsistent. You have to diminish God's power. You have to diminish or get a more realistic view of God's power or God's knowledge or God's presence or whether or not he's benevolent in order to get a realistic view of God. I think you have to go back, backwards off of that. I don't think the omni-God exists, okay, is what I'm saying. I'm coming very convinced that the omni-God doesn't exist. And I'm very sure the Christian God, the God in the Bible, doesn't exist. He's too logically inconsistent as well. And so what I'm doing is I'm pushing back right now on Thursdays, looking more at the questions surrounding God that attack the omni-God because I want to make sure that we have had a full discussion on that. And, I'll get back to the arguments for God eventually, but I'm still pushing this question. And I guess we'll see where we end up, but it's just been an interesting little thing to have happen. And that's kind of it. Last week's soapbox, about apologists, where is apologetics going? Got a lot of reaction to that in the comments. Mostly like, yes, this is where apologetics is. And even a few theists bemoaning the current state of apologetics, that it has really kind of gone off the edge and said, we know this is true because we believe it in our heart. And it's like, that's not really good evidence. I continue to get the attacks on me from a personal character point of view. It's like, I have my mannerism. I am who I am. I'm a very patient person. For the most part, I think I developed it as a pastor. I put up a lot of shit, so I continue to do so. But at the same time, I don't really put up with personal insults. I don't put up with weirdness. But in the case of apologetics, it was like, well, you need to watch this apologist. And I like look at the name, I'm like, I already have. Okay, I've already read that guy. Okay, I took apologetics in Bible college. I read a lot of the common apologists that were at the time in that class. Okay, I've looked at all that stuff. Since when I was deconstructing my faith, apologists were my regular go-to. I was listening to them and reading them and bemoaning it. And now we've reached, some people, well, it's always been this way. Well, no, because there was always the veneer of trying to make it rational. What I saw inspiring philosophy do is completely go off the edge and not be rational anymore. Okay, because it's not about rationality, it's about being part of a love story. It's all about emotion. It's an emotional appeal and an appeal to intuition. And apologists didn't do that before. They were always trying to at least put a rational spin on it because that part of humanity they recognized existed. And it's like they're only trying to appeal to a certain aspect of humanity. And human beings are much too complex to just boil down your belief in God to an emotional appeal and an appeal to intuition. That's my contention. There needs to be a rational side to this. There needs to be a holistic view of, if you're trying to win the whole person, then the gospel should appeal to the whole person in some way, shape, or form. And it doesn't do that. It's absurd, so it doesn't appeal to the rationale side. And that's where you lose me. And so that video got a lot of comments. But I will acknowledge that it's a little bit too long, and I probably will never do a video that long again. I'm trying to get everything down to about a half hour, and then that's a good length for people to just kind of be there. And I do shorter videos too, so. And I will continue to do videos on like Tuesday and Wednesday that I don't really care about the views on, because they're for those of you that are deconverting. So there's that. I'm thinking about going to a convention at some point, probably in August. I don't want to give all the details of that, and representing the Clergy Project at that. The only reason I'm going to this one is it's in Canada, and it's like right across the river from Detroit. So it's south of Windsor, I believe, and I looked at it and said, "Oh crap, that's only a 4-hour drive for me, and I can get there. And if somebody puts me up, I'm good. And I got some vacation time coming, so it might be a good time for me to take a vacation right after that. So that's definitely in the works for me. Have more details. I know that I have another podcast on March 2nd, I think. I'll give more details of that. That's where I'm heading. I keep promising the videos and stuff and some of the improvements on the channel, but I get to the weekend and I'm very tired. And for some reason, I'm exhausted mentally a lot of times on Fridays and Saturdays. That's why I kind of cut back my videos down to 5 a week instead of 6 to get a little bit more relaxing time. And so there is that aspect of it. I'm continuing to learn how to manage my hypersensitivity and my autism, and making it work for me and not against me. Okay, it can be a very positive thing in some respects. So be patient with me. I'm not perfect, and I never will claim to be. I always get this. Maybe that's one type of comment that still bothers me, where people are real pedantic about little details. But yeah, there's things like that, so that bother me. It's like, no, I'm not here to be perfect. I'm just here to be a guy with a voice and encourage other voices. So thank you very much for putting up with some of the inconsistencies. I'm hoping to be a little bit more consistent, and so that's where I'm heading. So thanks once again for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. It's just been an interesting week, just good, steady, consistent growth, and I appreciate that. As long as that continues, and then we'll have the spurts that come when I get some attention, bigger attention in some way because the YouTube algorithm smiles, that's good for me. But I've literally doubled the size of this channel in the last month, and so I'm very, very cognizant of thank you. To all you new subscribers, thank you very much. You're what makes this channel grow. And just as an aside note, got my first paycheck from Google, and wasn't a lot of money, but there's something emotionally satisfying about that after 4 years, okay, of doing this. So thank you very much to all of you for watching the videos and the ad revenue and the memberships. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. So make sure you spend all your time, your money, your opportunities pursuing the things that lead to a better you, better relationships with the people you love and care for, and a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I know, I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.